Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the 2002 Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man movie. We've had a lot of Spider-Man movies in the last 20 years with multiple different leading actors, but this was the first of them if we're looking live action. High school outcast Peter Parker, who we all know because we all know who Spider-Man is, right? He lives with his aunt and uncle and pines for the girl next door. He's bright, but of small stature and lacking in confidence, which means that he gets picked on by his classmates, except for his love interest and his one male friend. But everything changes when Peter gets bitten by a genetically engineered spider and develops superpowers. Heightened strength, speed and resilience, a sixth sense for danger, and the ability to scale walls and produce web from his wrists. While he's basically a good kid, Peter's first thought for using his powers is to make some money so he can buy a car and impress the girl he likes, which is a refreshingly normal response to sudden opportunity. Even when confronted with a chance to use his powers to stop a crime, Peter steps aside instead. It's not his problem, after all. But, alas, as Peter has already been told in the film, with great power comes great responsibility. The crook goes on to murder Peter's uncle, catapulting the remorseful young man into the role of masked crime fighter. I trust I'm not spoiling anything by telling you this. I mean, Spider-Man's been around for 60 years at this point. We all know who he is, right? Stricken with remorse, Peter resolves to use his powers to help others and fight injustice. Unfortunately, not everyone possessed of great power reacts to personal setbacks with such altruism. In fact, some react with aggression and violence, which is the case of the cackling killer dubbed the Green Goblin, whose crimes and whose fascination with Spider-Man quickly make him the novice superhero's first nemesis. So, Sony, who produced Spider-Man, took some pretty big gambles on this film. The movie's budget was nearly twice that of Fox's X-Men 2 years early, and only a couple of million short of the year's most expensive film, the James Bond offering Die Another Day. So there's a lot of money on the line. But the gamble paid off. This film was a major commercial success, becoming the first film to pass the $100 million mark in a single weekend, and romping on to a worldwide box office of over $800 million. It finished the year as the number 3 highest grossing film, beaten only by The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The movie was also a critical success with an overwhelmingly positive reception. And I'm not going to butt the trend. While it's absolutely true that the intervening 20 years have given us bigger and better superhero movies and even bigger and better Spider-Man movies, this movie was absolutely a good one and deserved its status as a genuine breakthrough hit for the Marvel properties. So, let's talk about what I like about it. So, I was heavily into the comics in the early and mid-90s at a time when the idea of superheroes dominating the cinematic landscape seemed pretty ludicrous. I mean, we'd had the Batman films, but that franchise had gone seriously awry by the third and fourth movies, much like the earlier Superman films had. Also, those were DC properties, while I was mostly a Marvel reader, and prior to 2000's X-Men, the only successful Marvel movie was 1998's Blade, which was basically a trenchcoats and katanas vampire action film that hid any connection to superheroes as deep as it could. In fact, as the 21st century dawned, the idea that Hollywood would make films about the spandex set without seeming embarrassed by their own source material seemed pretty remote. Even X-Men, while a decent film, had sharply toned down the costume hero element of the property, eschewing bright colours and distinctive themed outfits in favour of sticking most of the cast into black pleather leather bodysuits. And that's probably why Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was such a breath of fresh air to me, because it shows none of that self-consciousness. This perhaps should not have been a surprise, given Raimi's earlier tilt at the genre with his own creation Darkman, but it certainly was a pleasant one for me. This was the first big-budget film based on a Marvel superhero to unabashedly embrace the source material, giving Spider-Man his iconic red and blue costume and equipping the Green Goblin with a suitably leering visage and nifty bat-winged flying machine. Now, I've already mentioned the financial punt that Sony took on the film, but the studio compounded this with their selection of director and leading man. When Sam Raimi got the director's job for this film in 2000, he was best known for the schlocky low-budget horror franchise The Evil Dead, and his two biggest budget films, 1995's The Quick and the Dead and 1999's For Love of the Game, had both been financial flops. But Raimi had two things going for him. The first was that he'd made the financially and critically successful Darkman, which, though on a much smaller scale and very different tone, was still a superhero movie complete with special powers and secret layers. The second, and apparently the thing that clinched him for the job, was that he was a lifelong fan of the Spider-Man comics. Now, putting a fan of a property in charge of a film of that property is not always a good idea. It can and has misfired. Sometimes the fan just isn't the right choice for any number of reasons, but in this case it was a choice that came up trumps. Raimi did a solid job of capturing the heart of Spider-Man comics, pleasing his fellow fans, while also achieving the probably more important job of making the film accessible and entertaining to the much bigger audience, who mostly just knew of Spider-Man from kids' TV shows and lunchboxes. The studio also cast Tobey Maguire in the lead role. He was Raimi's first choice to play the title character, but he was also a potentially bold decision to take him, as he was not known for playing action roles. But he proved a good selection. He's very good as both the awkward Peter Parker and the more confident, wise-cracking Spider-Man, and his involvement also encouraged the very talented Kirsten Dunst to audition. I've yet to see a movie that's not made better by Ms. Dunst being cast in it, and this is no exception. Now, the script of this film is not perfect. There are a few hokey bits that may be more likely to trigger giggles than the intended pathos, but it's overall quite solid, and it does a good job of laying out a solid thematic core to its main conflict. On the one hand, it has Peter Parker, a social outcast with neither money nor status, who stumbles into great power and who, after an initial bit of selfish waywardness, decides to use that power to help others and make the world a better place. Opposing him, we have the Green Goblin, whose non-costumed alter ego already has wealth and power, but who actively and compulsively grasps for more. Peter's great power brings great responsibility philosophy is thematically opposed by the Goblins, who almost literally embodies a might makes right outlook on life. Their struggle is not just one of criminal and crime fighter, but one driven by a fundamental conflict in their worldview. And that adds, I think, some extra weight to their struggle. It's a real strength of the movie. Now, as I said, the intervening 20 years have seen this film surpassed by other examples of even more entertaining superhero adventure, but the 2002 Spider-Man remains a good film in its own right, and it's well worth seeing if you're a fan of such fare. Next time, a fine cast gets rather squandered in Blake Edwards' 1965 comedy, The Great Race. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.